Welcome, everyone, to Executive Exchange Radio, broadcasting from Liberty Talk Radio studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm your moderator, Joe Cristiano, better known as America's foremost corporate exorcist. This program is hosted by Dr. Jennifer Beeman and Mr. George Gutierrez, both members of the BMOC group and a trusted advisors to chief executives and business leaders across the nation. During our live broadcast, we ask you to call with your questions or comments, 646-652-4620. I'll repeat that, 646-652-4620. Press the 1 button if you're listening in and you want to ask a question or make a comment, you want to break in, press the 1 button. Today we're going to explore the concept of talent and talent management. George, Jennifer, Dr. Beeman, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Now, when we talk about talent, very often we only use reference talent to Broadway musicals, and yet you're introducing the term talent in management. This is an all-time first for me, and I've been around for a long, long time. Would you help explain that to me?
Sure. Let me start, and then we'll have Dr. Beeman help me out a little bit. But talent management is really something that has emerged from the human resources perspective, as the practice of, seeking out very talented and very competent folks emerged some time back. So what we think and strongly believe in is that just because you have a whole lot of talent, that's not enough. So there are ways of managing the talent recruiting process or promotion process, if you would, within an organization that will allow your investment in that talent and that person, if you would, to be an investment that brings, a positive return that is properly aligned with the things that you want to achieve organizational.
Yes, and in further support, may I interject something?
Yes, please.
Yes?
Yes.
In addition to talent, and if the individual does not have the appropriate attitude or is not trainable, for instance, where it's difficult to see the talent, so we're unable to utilize one's talent to the fullest if an inappropriate behavior or inappropriate attitude is being demonstrated. So I just wanted to add that to George's comment.
Now, let me ask you, how do we define talent? Because I in my head is stuck talent. I think of someone, dancing on stage. But since I don't reference talent with a interview process for management, for a management position, I'm having a difficult time, and maybe the audience is having a difficult time saying, how do I identify that? Or first of all, how do I define it? Once I define it, how do I recognize it?
Okay, that's really a good question, Joe. So let's do what you do as a corporate exorcist.
Okay.
let's bring out this talent thing in a way that we and the audience can visualize it. So you're correct. From my perspective, when we think of talent, we think of artistic talent, people that can either sing, play an instrument, or be a ballerina that can dance beautifully. But let's do this. I would wage that many of us are tuned in to the political process that is currently taking place in Washington, D.C., where the cabinet that our current president has selected is going through some sort of confirmation process for all of us to see. So let's take, for example, Jeff Sessions. Mr. Sessions is being considered to be one of the pretty high position in the country. So what kind of talent is it that he has for that particular position? Well, he has to be an attorney, so he has that, all right? So he's actually, has the credentials and the certifications that are required to meet the demands of the position. He has to be an attorney. He is. If you look at the rest of his resume, if you would, from a past life performance and experiences, and as you listen to how the different folks have talked with him, to him, and about him, you can see there are many other things or many other attributes that they bring out when they speak in his behalf or against him. So we can see, that if we use the opening statement of talent is not enough, you can see this guy is a very talented individual. He's got the right education, he's got the right experience, but he's also done some things that has at least the people that are vetting him, some of the people that are vetting him, clearly against him. So going through this particular process, eventually they will be able to make a decision of whether or not he's got the right talent, to fit within the position that he's being considered for. Does that help with that kind of a visualization?
Okay, that does help. Dr. Beeman, would you like to make a comment on that or add something to it?
Yes, in further support, as things proceed and things unfold, we will be, and I go back to the attitude part, because I truly believe that we are unable to fully, without the right attitude and without the right behavior, we're simply unable to fully demonstrate or articulate our talent, fully execute it, if it's not being received the way that we intended. And we do that through our behavior. So when we're thinking about talent, it's more comprehensive than just cognitive or technical skills. That's, I think, where naturally where George was headed, and I just wanted to add that additional part in there. It's an area that people oftentimes don't realize the magnitude of, because, for instance, if we notice that a particular attitude is overly aggressive, for instance, and so much so that we don't see the talent. In essence, what it can do is shadow the talent, because people can be so focused on say, for instance, an inappropriate behavior. So sometimes we can miss someone's talent simply because of their attitude. But on the same note, with the appropriate behavior, that will just emphasize or further demonstrate their talent, because it's easier to receive, it's easier to see, and it's more obvious.
Well, how do we define talent then in this context?
That's a really good question. So let's go quickly through this, because I don't think it's a matter of defining it, it's a matter of identifying it. So it's a different way of looking at it. And Dr. Beeman is absolutely right. And I kind of like the way she really began with it up front, which is an attitude. So we look at defining this thing from a behavioral perspective, and then we use attitude, as the one thing that equals the rest of the things. So if a person has the wrong attitude about something, whether it's motivational or otherwise, then it doesn't matter how much technically proficient they are or what kind of knowledge or skills they have, okay? And again, in that case, talent would not be enough. The idea is for us to be able to identify. So we believe that if a person has a combination of the right skills and the right knowledge, okay, suited for a specific area. So let's just say you're looking to promote somebody or select somebody for promotion within your corporate environment. And this person has been working in a particular department for many years, so that person has the institutional knowledge and it's got the right skills, that are required for that position. But you want to take them into a new position of leadership. The first thing we need to do is identify whether or not that person possesses any leadership skills. And the way to do that, you do an assessment. So you have to be able to answer the right types of questions. Does the person have the right skills? Does the person have the right knowledge? And then if the answer is in the positive, then does the person have the right goals? And are the goals in alignment with the organizational goals? And we know that if you can get that far into the identification or defining this talent thing, then we know that that individual will experience positive behavioral changes, as they grow into a new position or in the position that they're in. And so those behavioral changes equals to improved results in two different levels, at the organizational level and also at the personal level, which is really where we want everybody to be sort of balanced out, as they engage within the work environment.
Well, the talent changes depending on the level of the position that you're in. If you're a first-line supervisor, if you're a technician and you're working as a technician, you require certain talents. To be a first-line supervisor of maybe the technicians, that changes the paradigm altogether. Now, Warren Buffett, for example, has a lot of talents, but he may make a very poor technician on the line. So his talents are very different. And when you look at some of the world's richest people, richest business people, I heard the statistics. I haven't verified it, but they said over 50% do not have a college education. Many don't have even a high school education. So it's interesting that the definition of talent for a particular job changes with the job function and the scope of the job itself. Am I on the right track, or did I just steer the train right off the rails?
No, I think you just jumped off the roof a little bit here. So when we think about talent, let's go back to the way you first started. There's something that is inherent in us. So some of us, are born with the propensity for music, and for some reason, we're drawn to that particular, side of life, and we become musicians, with a little bit of training, and we just love it, and we're immersed in that. Other people, for some reason, they like to argue, and they do it so well that they become attorneys. So other people are born with different inherent, I think, talents that once they discover what those talents are, then they really hone them and improve them. And I'm going to give this to Dr. Beaman in a minute. I don't want to get this wrong, but when you're talking about different levels of responsibility organizationally, now we're talking about skills, okay? So you were right, and I think Dr. Beaman has an example of one of her clients in the manufacturing sector, where they were sharing with us not long ago that they had this really good worker, and he had been within that department for a bunch of years, and because of seniority, someone decided, to give him a chance at becoming the foreman. And then as they studied him, and they did give him the position and all that, but they discovered that he was talented at what he was doing on the floor, but he didn't have the skills,
right,
to become a supervisor. And we see that quite often. You select your super workers, and because they're doing so well in the position, then all of a sudden you think, well, If we can have 10 of those, we can put them in charge of the whole department, and then we'll flourish. Well, what happens is when they don't have the skills, in this case, the right type of leadership skills, like you were talking about Warren Buffett, he's got certain skills and certain talents that he uses very well. But if you put him somewhere else, he'll fail at it. And that's what happened in this example. They ended up promoting a super worker into a supervisory position. Then they discovered that he really had a bad attitude. Plus, he wasn't properly prepared in terms of having the right skills. And Dr. Beeman can correct me, but I think within less than a year that they had to fire the guy.
Yes, that's correct. You know, and in addition to Joe, what you were saying too about level of education, there's different types of intelligence, and when we recognize those, and people take advantage of them, such as what we see in so many very, very successful people without, higher education. There's types of talents and skill traits that come, that are known as soft skills or social skills, in addition to cognitive skills. So when we're aware of those and we take advantage of what we do know, we can hone in on those. And then in further support of what George was saying about the assessments, even when we mean well and we want to do well at work, oftentimes we try to be transparent so we can succeed, but there's blind spots. Everybody has blind spots, no matter how honest and transparent we are. So the assessments will help unveil those and give us the opportunity to identify those, so we can take advantage of what our natural and inherent traits are, so we can hone in on them. So because sometimes we might have an inherent skill or a talent that that might not be the same that we need in our role at work, and so it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle for us at work if we are not properly aligned. Whereas if we have that knowledge, we can it just makes it easier to succeed on a more natural level. Not that we can't be successful, it just makes it easier.
Yeah. Well, I
can get there faster.
I own a occupational health testing company. In my younger years, I was in factories all the time, of course, promoting the business and seeing everything's going all right. And what I've learned is that some people had their employees who were in a job that would have driven me nuts after about 2 or 3 minutes of doing it. Let me give you a prime example, a welder. There were welders that could literally stare at that bead for literally 12 hours straight in one day. Now, that person loved welding and they were masters at it. If that person was the best welder, how often do you see the management saying, well, he's the best welder, thus he would be our next supervisor? When that, in fact, is probably a mistake, or could be a mistake, because he's good in what he does because he loves what he does. Right. Probably the poorest welder, who is a good employee, but this is not his life's blood. He's using welding to get ahead and maybe do other things. Do you find that management sometimes misplaces that evaluation of talent?
Oh yes. Oh, definitely. I think especially. Oh, I didn't mean to jump in there, George. Go ahead. Did you want to speak on that?
Go ahead.
I think that especially in our contemporary organizations, it seems like as of late, especially, they are promoting individuals to management positions when they're really not ready. And for instance, an individual can be very passionate about welding, which can make him an amazing welder. Really skillful, yes. Extremely impressive work, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's management material. He can be trained, and if he's got the right attitude and the right behavior, and if he wants it, and if all those things line up accurately, it can certainly work. Yes, it can certainly work, but it's not automatic. And I think that's where a lot of companies and businesses sometimes go wrong. They just assume that because he's an awesome welder, that let's just put him into management, or maybe because he's been here the longest, let's put him into management. And a lot of people are going to jump on the opportunity because it usually comes with a little bit of a pay raise, when in fact that's not. There's a lot more to the position than just welding, and there's unfortunately setting those people up to not be as successful as they were if they were in, if things were handled a little bit more appropriately.
Well, if companies don't exercise the principle of talent management, everyone would be promoted to the level of incompetence, and at that level, it would destroy the corporation. Am I oversimplifying that, or is that a possibility?
Go ahead, George. Since I kept checking, I'll keep yakking if you like.
I've had multiple conversations with Joe about this, and he just likes to exercise these things, just get it all out there, and in a way that is not only colorful but also meaningful. I think Joe, that there are many organizations that they're doing a decent job at doing the right things in terms of conducting performance reviews on a regular basis, and even using assessments at the right time. So I can tell you, at the very senior levels, we've vetted. We brought in consultants and literally do executive assessment, and then provided work sessions with subordinate leaders to make sure that before that person was promoted to a higher levels of responsibility, there was some sort of consensus that person possessed the right skills and the right talents. I've seen organizations that do it down to the middle management level, and there's all kinds of different tools that are used, or inventories. For example, people use 360s. Dr. Bielman and I use about 4 or 5 different tools that we use, that we recommend that people would use for different levels. We have organizational tools, and we have executive tools from middle management all the way to top executives. And what that does, it really allows the deciding individual to understand what motivates and what drives and how that particular person prefers to behave. And by understanding how that person is driven, what is it that really makes them happy in terms of how they define the way to achieve success, then they're able to make sure that they're placed in the right position. So here's an example. We found one person that was in a sales position, and was being paid by commission, and went for about a year and didn't close anything. And wasn't able to close any sales. They were giving her a workload, and she just didn't perform. We went and did an assessment and figured out that she was not driven by economics. She had what motivated her was really helping people and helping organizations. So they took all her accounts away, and they gave her all the nonprofit accounts. And by year 2, she became the top salesperson in the organization. Just because the organization was able to understand how to incentivize her in a way that will be in alignment, with her goals and the organizational goals. So they invested into a good employee instead of hiring another one, but they were able to reallocate the position that she was in, and just let her go to work.
And take advantage of that.
Right.
Well,
that's a good example.
Does management rely on itself to determine talent, or should management, when they feel that someone, or they have an indication that someone could be more effective in a higher level in the organization, should management actually ask that person, or do they ask typically that person, whether or not they'd like more responsibility, and whether or not those type of responsibilities fits with this person, whether or not those responsibilities is something that they really want to tackle? Or should that be solely on the decided by the management group itself?
You want to take that one, Dr. Beeman?
Sure. In my experience, it goes both ways. It depends on the organization, and it depends on the how big the organization is, how complex things are. I am a firm believer that if acute attention is applied to this particular step in the process, it can be very much a win-win. But you've really made a really good point, Joe, and that is that this is the right time to address, to align these kinds of things. If, identify and align, if appropriate, and if applicable, and if the organizational structure is, allots for that. But I know that's a very general answer. So, George, did you want to add more details?
Yes. So the premise of the answer is yes. There's different levels of dealing with this particular situation. So, for example, when you're dealing with the government organizations, they're very good at developing what they call career management fields. Okay, so they'll develop a 30-year lifespan of a person's career with a couple of tracks on it. One is a leadership and management track, and the other one is a technical track. So an engineer, for example, can decide, going back to let's call this engineer a welder. He can decide, that he's never going to be in management because he hates it. He would rather be welding all day long. But within that 30-year lifespan, there's certain gates that he or she would have to cross in terms of certifications, professional development, and some sort of education program, okay? So they can increase their skills and their knowledge about their trade. And they can track for a very long time within that field. And then you have the other type of engineer that would prefer to, kind of be on the floor doing the welding, for a few years, but then start looking at positions of more responsibility where they can become a manager. So then normally the human resources departments are the ones that track this career management fields, and they create these gates. So for example, they'll say, well, once you've been in the organization for X number of years, then by then you should have completed all these continuing education credits. You should have received all this training. And if you really want to be in some kind of leadership position, maybe you should consider some sort of formal, educational program. So they're able to grow them on a career management field from within that spans, a long period of time. But now we're talking about really where the rubber meets the road, even up to the senior levels. In other organizations, to where the folks or the executive teams are bringing in C-level talent, chief executive type talent. Those decisions are made differently. So a good example was the one of Jeff Sessions earlier today, because their span of control and level of responsibilities are much greater. So you have to look beyond education and beyond resumes. You literally have to look at life experiences, etc. So those folks are vetted differently by a different group of people. And sometimes, I don't know if Dr. Beeman is familiar with this, but sometimes, for example, the nonprofits, when they want to bring in a new CEO for a nonprofit, they'll develop a committee for that. And usually they'll bring in an outside consultant to lead the committee. And then they develop all the parameters, and then they interview a bunch of people, and then they make a recommendation for hire, once they found the right talent. So It depends on the organization, whether you're a for-profit, whether you're a civic organization, whether you're a nonprofit, or even a government organization, on how that is managed.
Well, believe it or not, we have chewed up our 30 minutes already. I cannot believe it. I'm just looking at the clock, and I cannot believe. I thought maybe 15 minutes passed by. You guys are good. You know, time flies when you're having fun, as they say. Well, please, before we end this broadcast, I think it's important for people to know how they can contact you and any other information you'd like to impart, to our audience and to people listening into the video on YouTube and soon on your website, I guess, as we're developing that. And then I guess we'll be together again, another live broadcast in the next couple of weeks or so. So if I'd like to turn it back to you guys.
Well, thank you. We have a dedicated line for the Executive Exchange Radio. I don't know what the extension is, but the number is, it's a toll-free number, it's 888-720-6996. And I'll be happy to hear folks' comments, maybe topics they may be interested in hearing us, tackle and talk about. If you call us and just leave us a message, we promise that we'll bring it up the next time we're on the air.
Okay, and what about your website, maybe, if they want to visit your website?
Do you know it by heart, George?
No, but I'm looking for it. I'll tell you what it is in a minute.
I've got it here. It's EX2, the number 2, leaders.com.
EX2leaders.com.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been interesting. I think we can go on for hours, by the way, but maybe we'll continue some of this on the next broadcast, and plus we'll introduce some new material. Thank you so much for joining me today as a moderator for Executive Exchange Radio.
Thank you. Thank
you.
Thank you. Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay,
right,
folks,
bye-bye.
thank you very much for listening in. We hope that you would enjoy this this broadcast. We will be doing this every couple of weeks and taking on different subjects on the areas of management with the Executive Exchange Radio Group. And if they wish, they can continue to have me as the moderator. You could go to their website or give them a call if you have any questions. Okay? Thank you so much for listening in, and stay tuned, and goodbye.